This is the Moving from Mission to Action workshop. I'm the Reverend Renee Ruchotzke. I am the Leadership Development Consultant for the Central East Regional Group. When I'm talking about moving from mission to action, there are three assumptions that I'm working with. And these are like three prerequisites before you can put into place the stuff that I'm talking about. The first is that you have to have a compelling mission. The mission statement that people who wrote 20 years ago who are no longer part of the congregation, or maybe only have a couple of them are, that's not the mission I'm talking about. I'm talking about a mission that is a living part, or hoping to be a living part of your congregational life. The second, and maybe the most critical, is having cohesive leadership. And I'll get into a little more about what this means. And the third thing is clear communication. So this is basically, if you're going to be taking notes using bullet points, these are the three main bullet points that I'll be working on. And the handouts that I have available have some of the graphics and some of the key points, so hopefully you won't have to do a whole lot of note-taking. And I will have the slides available within the next few weeks on the Surge website. So before I get into the actual content, I want to share a little bit of the story of why I'm doing this workshop this year. And it goes back to some of our congregations, actually some of the evangelical congregations. There's a missional movement among the evangelicals. And what they have done is become really, really focused on what their ministries are. And so, of course, we have entrepreneurial Unitarian Universalist ministers and other leaders who read all the stuff that they put out and translate it into Unitarian Universalist theology and polity and the way we do things. And some of our ministers and churches are actually putting some of these ideas into action in our congregations. And I'm actually going to hold up a couple examples. One is First Unitarian Rochester. So if the person who is in the room talking about Rochester, I'm going to use them as one of the examples. Also, Shawnee Mission Church in, thinking it's Kansas City. Now I'm blanking on it. Overland Park, Kansas. And the third congregation is actually comes from the Congregationalist tradition, as do we, but it's Middle Collegiate Church in Lower Manhattan in New York City, a very, very progressive, liberal, multicultural church that says Jesus maybe 2 or 3 times more a month than we do, but basically very similar in values to Unitarian Universalist. So seeing how these congregations have put mission into action are the models that I'm going to be holding up. The other resource is a resource that our evangelical cousins use. And it's a book by Patrick Lencioni called The Advantage. It's a fairly new book. The diagrams that I have here are adapted out of some of his diagrams. But he wrote the book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, Death by Meeting. He's a kind of a Gen Xer leadership consultant. And I just found this book really, really helpful. I refer to it over and over again. And if you're looking, it's a business book, of course, but it's also a book that nonprofits use, as well as a lot of congregational leaders. So that's my bibliography. So I want to start talking about compelling mission and what that really means. Now, those of you who've done mission work recently with consultants from either the Central East Regional Group or some of the other, maybe in another district, we start out with values exercises. What are the core values of your congregation? So as you look into how you're going to live your mission, it's important to reconnect with those core values in some of your other relational values. And this is important because sometimes the mission statements that we construct don't articulate as clearly as we would like what they mean because they've been wordsmithed a little bit, but to really pay attention to what the core values that you were trying to express were when you were writing the mission statement. So this little diagram is in your handout, but Lencioni talks about 4 different kinds of values, and I found this really, really helpful as we discern how we put our mission into action. There are aspirational values, accidental values, assumed values, and our core values. And I'm going to go through each one of these. Core values are the things that make your congregation unique. It's part of, it could be a deal breaker kind of aspect of your congregation. It's part of your identity, part of your DNA. You might have the way your relationship with authority is one of these core values. If you have a really strong lay-led congregation, a person who's a very take charge, I want to do it all kind of person is not going to be a good fit for that congregation. If your congregation likes having really strong leaders, a person who wants to do shared ministry might get resistance. So there's values that are unique to, not unique, but they're essential to your congregation. Whether everybody volunteers and pitches in, or if you want to have paid staff, that's another kind of core value. And it should help guide everything you do. And hopefully these were the values that helped you to write your mission statement. And maybe they've been lost along the way, so it's good for your leadership group to reconnect with those. And of course, they should point to your mission because that's what helps you form your mission in the first place. So here's a mission statement that embeds some core values. This is from First Unitarian of Rochester. So they connect in a community of support that trusts, that celebrates and enhances the fullness of life and experiences the sacred. We know our deeper selves and can articulate our individual core beliefs. We are open to life's gifts, to the diverse beliefs, ideas, gifts, and talents of others, and to the wisdoms of the ages. We serve needs greater than our own. So in that statement, I see values of support and trust. I see values of knowing oneself, learning how to articulate, so having that clarity of knowing and being able to articulate our deepest beliefs, and also this idea of service that's embedded in there. So these are some core values that I see as part of, that are shown in this mission statement. This is one from Middle Collegiate Church. They're clearly rooted in the Christian tradition, and I would call that one of their core values. They use Scripture in ways that support their progressive, multicultural values. They also have, there's a culturally diverse, inclusive, and growing community of faith. They're located in an area of Lower Manhattan that has a very diverse community, so they are very committed to connecting to that community. And then the third piece I want to call out is they are called by God to boldly do a new thing on earth. So they are calling themselves to living into change boldly. And so that's also, if you're a person who wants things to stay the same, this church is probably not a good fit for you. So does that make sense? A little core value. Okay. So the next kind of values I want to talk about are our aspirational values. We might put these in our vision statement, but they're our vision for the future. It's not part of who we are yet, but we're articulating who we want to be. So these are values that are intentional. Most of Unitarian Universalist congregations, except for a very small handful, might have an aspiration to be multicultural, but we're not there yet. We might be aspirational to, or have the aspiration to be truly multi-generational. Some of us are there, some of us are not there yet. So we might want to have an aspiration for being a presence in the community for social justice. Some of us are there, some of us are not there yet. And the thing about aspirational values is that you need to think about how your institution is going to help get you there. And there's this great quote from I have to wait till I get the quote up because I forgot his name. But it's, your mission is what's hanging on the wall. Your system is what's happening down the hall. This is from Andy Stanley. He's a evangelical church planting kind of minister. But he does a lot of talking about leadership development. And I just love this quote because, what we say we do and what we want to be is one thing. But we have to make sure that our systems, our institution, supports the mission. So it's that alignment that's key. And this is where some of us get stuck, is that we have these great aspirations, we have this mission statement, but we're not there yet. How do we get from here to there? And what are we doing now that's helping us? What are we doing right now that's not so helpful? Aspirational values help give us direction and create clarity. And what we encourage congregations to do is use them as a lens for everything that the congregation is considering. So the different ministries in the church, and then to lead in that direction. It's another way of asking, what are we asking us to become? And then the leadership leading in that direction. So this is, again, going to First Unitarian Rochester. This is these are all quotes, recent quotes from their website, so unless they changed it in the last couple of weeks, if you go to their website, you'll see this. But they distill down their mission statement into creating connection by listening to our deepest selves, opening to life's gifts, and serving needs greater than our own every day. This isn't a part-time thing. And then they distill that even further down to listen, open, serve. And if you go to First Unitarian Rochester, you'll see that in everything they do. You look at their website. It's there, it's clear. But the listen, open, serve really points back to this more fleshed out statement, which points back to the larger statement, which points back to their core values. So it's kind of a shorthand for this bigger idea and more clearly articulated values. But you don't want to go around, spewing out a paragraph every time you want to say who your church is. This is the shorthand. This is the vision statement of Middle Collegiate Church. They celebrate the arts. They embrace global community, and they are participating in interfaith dialogue for the purpose of justice and reconciliation. They're looking to expand their ministry. They're very concerned with justice. They actually offer a conference every year for leaders that flew in from all over the country to participate in, to help create a global community that encourages multicultural faith communities. And half of them that go are Unitarian Universalists. So we have, we're kind of catching their fire of how they do multiculturalism. But part of their mission is to reach out to folks like us who are trying to learn how to do it as well. Another one of the 4 values are assumed values. Lencioni calls these permission to play values. We might embed these in a behavioral covenant. Sometimes we don't always agree about how we're going to be together, so we need to negotiate that. And we do that through behavioral covenants. Those are a little bit different than our theological covenants. Sometimes we put them together, and that's the subject of another workshop. But what these are basic values that we want to hold together to help us do the work that we want to do. So things like honesty, integrity, respect, how we might articulate those. Depending on your history, you might want to articulate them a little bit more specifically than just depending on your culture. And these are things that are just values that are not unique to your congregation. Any group that gets together really needs to do these things in order to be a cohesive, effective group. Now, my favorite are the accidental values. These are values that are kind of embedded in your church culture or your structure systems, but aren't really intentional or are not focused toward your mission. And they actually might work against your aspirational values. So this happens a lot in an aspirational value of multiculturalism, and this is what a lot of our anti-racist, anti-oppressive multicultural work that I try to do and a lot of my colleagues try to do is how is our system or how are our churches' cultures white and we can't tell that they're white? What is it, or maybe upper class? I have a blog, and I wrote a blog a few months ago that really hit a nerve about how there's an accidental value in our congregations of having means and money, and that sometimes that can be a barrier to being a leader in our congregation or even participating in our congregation. So, for example, in my home congregation, we have this great service auction with all these wonderful dinners that we offer. And a lot of us in the congregation, that's our social calendar for the year. Well, if you don't have $300 or $400 to buy these dinners, you're not going to be part of the in crowd who goes to these dinners and hangs out together. And it's not like decisions happen there, but relationships are forged. So if we really want to be diverse economically, culturally, how is the way we're doing church being inclusive and being open for different people's participation? The same thing as we recruit leaders. Are we recruiting just the people that we know, or how do we get to know other people better, people that are at the margins, young adults, people of color, in a way that they have the opportunity to serve and participate in the same way that the usual suspects do? So I wanted to spend a few minutes, this is a little awkward in a big space like this, but I wanted to spend a few minutes coming up with some of the examples of these values as a group, and we'll see how this works with this group. So I'll do my best to here. Shout out what you think might be a core value. So this is a value that doesn't change, that's pretty unique to your congregation. That would be a core value. Inspirational Sunday service. So spirituality, maybe a spiritual spirit. Well, and holding space for humanists who may not use the term. So inspiration. So inspiration, being inspired. Maybe the church's job is to be inspired. Would that be a core value? Okay. So the inspiration of Sunday service. So this is unique, and you're Buffalo, right? So in the Buffalo church, you hold having an inspirational Sunday service is a core value for your congregation specifically. Excellent. So another congregation, can you think of one of your core values that may not be the same as Buffalo's? Yes. History. So a positive history, a proud history. Okay, so a long history. Excellent. Another? Yes. Caring. So it's a caring community. So caring for one another is a core value. And one more. Yes. Strong RE program. I've got that conference center frog in my throat. So those are really great examples because they're not all true of all congregations, right? But in certain congregations, they're very strong core values. So how about some of the aspirational values, some visions that you might have for your congregation's future? Yes, in the back. Multi-generational. And right in front of, yes. Active social justice. Okay, diversity. So a couple more in the back, in the middle. Build relationships with the community. Yes. Okay. And one more. Yes. So stronger inner community. Excellent. How about some of the assumed values, kind of the permission to play, how we want to get along together? What are some of those values? Yes. Open to divergent beliefs. Let me, do you mean theological beliefs? Okay. Permission to use the word theological to include humanism for the purpose of this. Okay, thank you. Yes.
Respect one another.
Respect one another. Democratically? Democratic process, maybe? Because that could mean that you invest your board or have policy governance or something. So, yes. Okay. So, yeah, contributions of membership. Yes. Accountable, forgiving. Can we put transparent in there too? Okay. Okay, now to my favorite, accidental values. Yes. So the accidental value of the one group, there's a value put on, well, so maybe the accidental value is it's okay to have strong arguments around theology. Conflict. You can have conflict. Conflict is in the playing field of theology, conflict is okay. So, okay. Yes.
Another accidental value probably would be fun.
Fun?
Yeah, I mean, people want to have fun. And that could be a value that can...
Okay.
Yeah.
So fun in that let's just have fun together rather than do something...
I'll give you an example.
Okay.
A couple of weeks ago, a women's group, which my wife happens to be in, all of a sudden, with the advanced knowledge of our organist and our minister, he played the first few bars of the postlude, and then all of a sudden these women got up from every place they were sitting and began dancing the aisles and up front in the church, and some members of the congregation joined in. And
It's like a flash mob kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
But that kind of thing has to happen once in a while, just to counter all the serious heavy stuff.
So that could be a core value too, though. I mean, for your congregation to lighten things up with fun could be a core value.
You can put it either place.
Yeah, well, accidental values tend to push against what your aspirational values are.
All right.
So, yes. Okay, there's an anti-Christian bias would be Catholics and Christians, but yeah. Which, okay, here's my little soapbox thing. Millennials, that's not their argument. Most of them don't have that anti-Christian bias, so when they hear that, their hypocrisy meter goes off because they don't. Yeah, they're nuns. They have nothing they're pushing against. So that's a good one. Yes, in the corner. Oh, you, yes.
I think at our church, there's an unspoken value that everyone loves classical music.
Okay. Or folk music at my, yes, in the back.
We've had problems with the right not to be offended.
The right not, so prickliness maybe?
Yeah, the accidental value, or maybe even assumed value, is I will need to hear that, I will hear it.
So you can, you're responsible to not have me hear what I don't want to hear, that kind of thing. So there's a prickliness. There's also like a PC police thing that can happen sometimes in our, can I lump those together? Personal PC as well as, okay. Over in the back yeah. Age and experience. So if you're under 40, you can't possibly know as much or have the ability to lead as well as somebody over 60. Yes? Ageism as well, okay. Don't trust anybody over. So political stuff, perhaps. We're all Democrats here. I've heard that in our congregation. Or we're all for gun control, or we're, position kinds of things that we hear. Yeah, Ivy?
Saving money.
The church is here to have a profit, right?
Or, like when the church gets a bunch of money saved up, but then something comes up, but they don't want to spend that money because that's this or that's,
Okay, so holding on to money.
Yeah.
Okay, I think you kind of get the idea here. So those are values that are embedded. Those are the what's happening down the hall kinds of things. Are those really serving our mission? Excellent. So the next area I want to talk about is cohesive leadership. One thing I love about coming east of the Alleghenies is that you see those little rowing boats. I don't see those in Ohio, but I just see them everywhere in every body of water, it seems, around here. It's really amazing. So I picked this graphic. So a lot of our churches have silos between the different areas of ministry. And it's really important, if you're really going to move your mission, is to break down those silos. You want all of your leadership to be on the same page. And I'm not just talking about the staff, although the staff is really important. And it's a little bit easier with staff because you can hire and fire staff. You can call a minister. You can dismiss a minister. You can hire, all these different positions. But the staff really has to work together. And for those of you who are familiar with First Unitarian Rochester, that's what they do. Their staff is really cohesive, on the same page. They have staff retreats regularly. I'll have some other examples of what they do as a group. But this also includes your governing body, whether it be your board of trustees, board of elders, whatever polity you have. And then also your other, what I call balcony committees. Your committee on shared ministry, your strategic planning group. If you're a threshold congregation, your threshold committee. They all have to be on the same page as well. And then your committee chairs, team leaders, and then your active members. And I sort of see this as a hierarchy of where you start. So your staff needs to be on the same page first, and then your governing board, and then these other groups. Although sometimes the strategic planning group or the committee on shared ministry might drive it and get there before the governing board does, depending on what your culture's like. So when I talk about leadership, I'm talking about the whole enchilada. So on this, this triangle, and again, you have this on your handout, there's different areas that help build this leadership. The first and probably the most important is a sense of vulnerability-based trust. And this is, it's kind of a hard culturally for some of us, those of us who are in communities that have a lot of academics. There's this, kind of shark mentality in a lot of academic circles that you don't show any weakness at all. But within our congregations, it's really a place where we really need to be our whole selves. The parts that aren't so great as well as the parts that we really excel at. So a really good leadership team are honest about their shortcomings as well as their strengths, and then they can play off each other. So, for example, I'm not all that great at the detail kinds of things when I do an event. I apologize for any of you who've attended one of my events when I didn't have the right diet food. It's something I really try to do, but it's not my strength. So I try to partner with someone who does that really well. So it's sometimes what we'll do is we want you to be good at everything, and then you're a failure if you're not good at one or two things. So how can we create space within our relationships to help us shore each other up and to fill in the spots where some of us have weaknesses, and how do we negotiate that? This also requires being transparent about what you're not so good at. We try to model that in our workshops. I like to do the technology stuff. Some of my colleagues not so much. So you'll have noticed that during some of the programs, I might have run over and done something with a projector or something. That's just how we roll. We know that that's I'm at the ready when technology is involved, and another person's at the ready when something else is involved. So part of this is that, we have to kind of let go of our ego. We don't have to be good at everything. And also our fear of, am I not going to be good enough if I'm not good at everything? So there's that trust piece that's really, really key. And really all you need is one person on your leadership team that picks at people or that triggers people around shame and fear and that sort of thing to keep the team from being effective. So this is why it's really important you have a good nominating process to nominate leaders who have a good level of emotional maturity, who are able to do this kind of work. The next aspect of a cohesive leadership team is knowing how to engage in creative conflict. So this is the bouncing ideas off each other. In brainstorming, there's the rule that there's no bad idea. In creative conflict, there are bad ideas. But it's the ability to say that. And, let's play it, let's try it on for 5 minutes. But you know what? That's really a crazy idea. There's no way we can do that. But that ability to say no to one another and to push against one another in a way that maybe a third way might come out. And it's the ability to be in the unknowing together as well. I mean, one thing Peter talked about in our theme speech today is we're entering it's an area with as much change as the Protestant Reformation. There's people, church just isn't a thing anymore, and that's what we're going into. And, how do we respond to that? I don't have the answer. No one has the answer to that. But together we can try different things and be in that unknowing together. Also being able to find let's try this for a while. This is good enough. We don't have to have the perfect answer each time. And also just tolerating that, a certain level of discomfort of, okay, this doesn't feel really good right now. The annual meeting's coming up. We haven't finished the budget yet. There's this, what can we do to be creative? Take that deep breath before you dive back into it. And this isn't artificial harmony, and it's not personal attacks. It's really this idea of being engaged and with that mission in mind the whole time. which brings us to commitment to mission. So every single person on your leadership group needs to be on board with the mission. And I'll talk a little bit about how that can happen, but that's just that's necessary. You know, everybody has to be pulling in the same direction. And one way that happens is you create a shared meaning of what the mission means for that leadership group, which means you engage with it, you spend some time with it. There's a spiritual practice called Lectio Divina, where you take a little piece of scripture and then you meditate on it, and then you read it again, and then you meditate on it, and you talk about it, and you read it again. It's almost that kind of process with your mission. What does it mean? How does this manifest for you? The next area is mutual accountability. And so this is holding yourselves accountable to your promises to one another as well as to the mission. And one of the questions I get a lot is, what happens if I have a volunteer who says they're going to do something and then they don't do it? And they're volunteers, right? You can't fire them. You might want to once in a while, but part of that accountability, if you've made promises and you've worked together saying, okay, we're going to try to serve the mission of our congregation in this way, if someone doesn't follow through or doesn't do what they said they're going to do or does the opposite or does what they want to do, it's not just, they're accountable to something greater than just that promise. They're accountable to the promise to the whole church and the mission of the congregation. So it adds a little bit more gravitas to the accountability piece. So, I mean, you've let me down maybe because I'm the leader and you said you'd do something you didn't, but you also let the congregation down, and you let down the people who aren't in our doors yet, who, you know, the greeter on Sunday morning shows up 5 minutes before the service instead of 20 minutes before the service. I mean, they've let down the newcomers that come through that door and didn't get the kind of hospitality that our congregation aspires to. And but having the courage to have those conversations, and also the understanding that it's okay to have those conversations. And I want my people I work with to hold me accountable when I fail. I want, I'm not perfect. I want to be able to have someone say to me, Renee, you really let me down when you didn't get that on-demand webinar up in time for our Committee on Ministry meeting. But it's important because, we need those little nudges to impel ourselves sometimes. We're not totally self-contained. So we do this quite often with board covenants at the beginning of the year. We'll all come to all the meetings. We'll all read the minutes on time. So what happens when people show up? Oh, wait a minute. Let me read the minutes from last week. No, our covenant says, you agreed. Our time together is valuable. There's all these things that you can bring to that conversation. And I talked about these other things. The ministry of the whole of a congregation, how we're accountable to that. And again, the mutual accountability, it's not like the PC police. It's really a group agreement. It's a group understanding of we're all serving something greater than ourselves. The last thing with cohesive leadership is having what they call SMART goals. And these are just measurables. Any of you who do gaming, it's really fun, getting those little badges or little incremental things that help you to see that you're going in the right direction. So Lencioni has another book. I can't think of the name of it, but he works at a pizza parlor for a while, and he watches how the minimum age pizza workers do, and this lousy customer service and stuff. But he finds ways for them to measure their performance in incremental ways that really raises the customer service level at this restaurant. And so we could do that with our greeters, for example. We could say, okay, how much time did you spend? How many new people did you talk to? How many name tags did you, get on people, to pay attention to those little numbers as well as the numbers that, we send to the UUA. Those little incremental numbers help to drive the bigger numbers. So again, it's your mission is what's hanging on the wall, but your system's what's happening down the hall. So encouraging the kinds of behaviors at the small level that help serve the larger mission. So the next piece is that clear communication piece. And there's two different metaphors that I've seen used for this. I prefer the one plumb lines, but I was an engineer in my first career, so I like the idea of the straight line. Another one is anchors. But these are, when I talked earlier about the leadership engaging with the mission, this is a way of developing expressions of how you're going to serve the mission in a way that is kind of an affirmation that you can work with on a daily basis. I really encourage people coming up with metaphors to describe behaviors that they want. So one of the examples Lencioni uses in his book is, we are a company that where no one shirks from sweeping a floor. So, I mean, literally, maybe they're not out sweeping floors, but it does give you a sense of, we're willing to pitch in to do even the most menial of tasks to help get the job done. So, you know, those kinds of expressions are what I mean when I talk about plumb lines. There's a quote here. This is from a book called Sticky Teams, Keeping Your Leadership Team and Staff on the Same Page. And he talks about how he uses the term plumb line. So it's really aligned to make sure that things are lining up with what your mission is. And he calls them organizational proverbs, a list of pithy sayings that describe clearly and concisely what we value and what I expect our staff to think through when making ministry decisions. So the congregation in State College in the UU Fellowship, I think, of Center County, Pennsylvania, and State College, they have a hospitality team thing. And, you know, hospitality is their mantra. You know, they use the word hospitality, but that sense of being really welcoming and you know, putting out the best china might be a way of saying that. I talk about sitting at the adult table versus sitting at the kid table. You know, we want to make sure, you know, we're inviting people to sit at the adult table, only the best for them. And again, I like to, you know, try to think of metaphors to help articulate your mission for your leadership group as you're trying to put it into practice. And part of the reason for this is, you know, who's the who that you're talking to when you're communicating. So you've got your core group of committed members, and, you know, they probably helped write the mission. They did all the value work. They probably have a good sense of what it means. But there's also like that other group, the people who kind of belong to your church, but they might be the one that show up at the annual meeting saying, I never heard about this. You know, they're members, but they're not quite as engaged. Then there's a group who's sort of interested. You know, Unitarian Universalism sounds kind of cool. I've been to a church a couple times. You know, they need a little bit more education about what the mission is. And then the oblivious, you know, people who don't necessarily care. But that might be somebody was telling me they ran into one of the dancers at the dance recital thing next door in the bathroom. And what's Unitarian Universalism? So, or what does your church do? You know, someone, when I say oblivious, you know, maybe they will care if they hear the right message about what you're doing. It's really important to over-communicate these plumb lines. And again, First Unitarian Rochester does a fabulous job of this because it shows up everywhere. Listen, open, serve. Listen, open, serve. And it shows up in all of their, like their path to membership. On our website, they shared a lot of their materials with us, and we have an on-demand webinar about that. But it shows how every piece of their path to membership lines up with one of those three words and what it really points to in their more lengthy mission statement. So, you know, I have like email up there, bulletin boards, you know, videos that you have out of the pulpit, all these different areas to really be clear about what the mission is, to help get that into your DNA. So this is a screenshot of the Shawnee Mission, Unitarian Universalist Church's website. And so on their webpage, you can go and look at their mission and vision section, and they have the mission statement you'll see. Oh, this is where I can use my cat toy that doubles as a pointer, so that you can look at their mission statement. But then every single ministry articulates what that mission means for their particular group. So this is... you know, it might be helpful for newcomers. It's helpful for the people doing the work to engage with it that way and come up with their own way. This is how the membership committee is serving the mission. This is how the stewardship committee is serving the mission. But it also sends a message of clarity out to the newcomer, that nun who heard of a church that may actually align with their personal beliefs. So how can we put this on our websites? And it's a way of communicating to the internal people, that committed group, as well as the interested, or the person who accidentally wanders on your website because they're searching for GLBT stuff, and that might be the oblivious. These are some statements on the First Unitarian Rochester Church. So, social justice, for example, it's about transforming the world and ourselves in the process. I mean, if I were a nun looking at stuff, that would be pretty intriguing to me, I think. And there's that listen, open, serve again up there. This is from the Middle Collegiate Church. And again, you'll see the Christ name up there. But really the things that we believe in, the priesthood of all believers, that's us as well. All of us are called to ministry, that's shared ministry. We celebrate the great diversity of God's human creation in our community. That's their way of articulating diversity. And then they live into that. So one example I want to give of their congregation, they have an African-American lead minister, Jackie Lewis. She used to be an Alban Institute consultant. She was called to this congregation, and they realized that they had a large Asian population in the neighborhood. So they ended up hiring a Chinese associate minister with the intention of having people in leadership that reflect the community, and it has resulted in an influx of more people of Asian descent coming to the congregation. They're actively recruiting young adults into lay leadership positions to add that kind of visibility and attract more lay leaders. They're looking for straight young men, by the way. That's the demographic they're having a hard time with. So part of what this does is it helps to create a real permission-giving culture. And there's this, once you have those clear plumb lines and you articulate things in a way for the whole vision of the congregation, but for every ministry of the every ministry within the congregation, people can understand better what you mean when you're saying this is our mission. So it's a little bit more specific. And people can say, okay, I have this idea, and it seems like it's in alignment with this, or I have this idea, but boy, it sure doesn't seem to match up with how we're doing pastoral care right now. But it gives you a chance for conversation that's a little bit better articulated. An example of this that happens in my own family, this is a little bit off, but maybe this will help give you the idea. I tell my daughter, 14, clean the bathroom. I have a real good idea of what that means. Her idea is nowhere near the same as what my idea is. So for her, I actually took photos of yes and no. Yes, no being the empty toilet paper roll on the floor, yes being the toilet paper roll being put into the trash, So that was my clear plumb lines, very, very clear. But, that's part of it. My idea of what spiritual depth, when I say that, there's, for the 50 or 60 people in this room, there's probably 50 or 60 different ideas of what that looks like. So if you can articulate that more clearly, that can give the folks who are interested in plugging in a better sense of what that looks like for your congregation with your core and aspirational values. And again, that covenantal trust piece, letting people make mistakes, and also the mutual accountability, paying attention, holding people accountable to what they say they're going to do, and also just, holding them in care at the same time. There's the joke about when you volunteer to teach religious education, you get the curriculum at the beginning of the year, and okay, see you in June. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking more of a how's it going? Is this feeding you? What did you think about this chapter on Islam? How did that go with the kids when you talked about it? So having that support and check-in, as well as the, did you get through the lesson okay? So what I'm going to invite you to do is, let's see, We have about 15 minutes. So I'm going to have you work together in small groups for the rest of our time together. And I want you to, in your context, I want you to come up with a personal, skip the last thing about the covenant, but I want you to start with a personal mission in service, on the back of your sheet, I should say, first of all, there's a case study. So I have the mission of the Shawnee Unitarian Church: invite everyone into caring community, inspire spiritual growth, involve all in working for a peaceful, fair, and free world. And then there's some mission statements, personal mission statements from some of the staff members. So what I want you to do in your small groups, I want you to have a personal mission statement, just something about your own personality, and reading that mission statement, how you engage with that and what it means to you. So something you might say. So for me, involve all in working for a peaceful, fair, and free world. My personal mission might be, I want to make sure young adults find our church and find a way to serve out of Unitarian Universalist values. That might be my personal mission about young adults. And then I want your group as a whole to come up with a mission of your cohort. So if some of you are building and grounds folks, how does being a building and grounds committee member serving this mission? So, using your own context, but also how you might develop your own statement that you would put on the website for your specific ministry. Does that make sense? So a personal statement and a statement as a group. And so what I thought I would do logistically, this is supposed to be my strength, we'll see if it really is, I'm just going to write a group cohort on a sheet of paper, invite one of you to come up, hold the paper up, and then other people who identify with that gather together and just find a corner of the room, and then I'll ring the chime in about 15 minutes. So what I'm going to ask some of you before we close, I really need another 15 minutes for this workshop, but so as you come back, I'd like to hear from you what the experience was like to engage with a mission in this way. Yes, go ahead. So it feels empowering to have articulated words and sort of the nebulous energy around a mission statement. Excellent. Another example of how this was? And you can say it totally, was lousy too. Yeah, Evan. Okay. So looking at your own gifts and your passions that you're bringing into the work was helpful. Challenging and helpful. Great. A couple more. One from one of the groups over here, maybe? Yes. It might actually get done. Accountability. It's difficult for volunteers to assist others in their own accountability. That's great. Excellent. Okay, one more. Yes. Rediscovering and discovering of values of the people that you know in this group. Excellent. Yes. Okay. So, beautiful. So the three words acted like a touchstone that helped bring you back and refocus the conversation. Touchstones are really good a way of thinking of those three words. Excellent.